And now for the main event. Are you ready? Please welcome to the stage the candidates in order. He is the Texas Senator from District 23, Royce West of Dallas. Next on stage, former U.S. Congressman from Houston, Chris Bell. Next, the founder and executive director of Jolt. From Austin, Texas, Cristina Singsun Ramirez. Next up, the current president of the Beaumont branch of the NAACP, Beaumont, Texas's own Michael Cooper. Next, she hails from Georgetown, Texas, Annie Garcia. Next, he ran for Texas governor in 2018 from the DFW Metroplex. Please welcome Adriano Seguela. She ran for the U.S. Senate in 2018 from Pasadena, Texas, Sima Hernandez. He ran for county judge in Chambers County in 2018 from Baytown, Texas, Jack Daniel Foster Jr. He was a commander of the U.S. Army Forces in the Horn of Africa. From Harlingen, Texas, please welcome Victor Harris. She's a former Houston City Council member from Houston, Amanda Edwards. These are your candidates that you're going to hear from today. It happens to all of us, right? And now, the people that actually need to be able to speak, your moderators. First off, from KPRL-TV, the meteorologist and host of Houston Newsmakers, very involved in community organizations, currently the chair of the YMCA of Greater Houston, celebrating 45 years in journalism. Welcome to the stage, Cambrell Marshall. She is the current Harris County District Attorney. She's a native Houstonian responsible for seeing that justice is done in our Harris County criminal justice system. She's used to calling balls and strikes every day, and we thought she'd be a great moderator for this event. Please welcome to the stage, Kim Ogg.
KPRC.
Did you take issue? Did you take issue with that those call letters, Cambrell?
I wrote. My penmanship has never been good, so KPRC looked like an L. That's my bad.
It's election season. You know, people have a choice.
Well, I'm in the right place. I think I'm an independent. I'm not a Democrat or Republican, but I'm happy to be invited to be a part of this. You support me? Okay. Councilwoman Jackson Lee's supporting this independent. Thank you.
If nominated, we hope you will serve, Cambrell.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, listen, I want to welcome everyone to today's 2020 Texas Democratic Primary Senate Candidate Forum, sponsored by, and we can't say them enough times, Cy-Fair Area Democrats, Cypress Tomball Area Democrats, Democratic Club of the Woodlands, Humble Area Democrats. I know, it's pretty amazing that we have a Democratic club in the Woodlands. After a long dry spell. Humble Area Democrats, Kingwood Area Democrats, Spring Democratic Club, Stonewall Area Democrats, and the Harris County Democratic Party. And now I'd like to introduce our host and the pastor of this fabulous church, serving so many in need, Pastor Deckard. Come on down.
began to pray. Let me make a real quick statement. Over the last decade, there was a Super Bowl here in Houston, and one of the visiting teams showed up in the Greens Point community, and they realized they were in the Greens Point community, then called Guns Point. They refused to get off the bus. Today, you're here in the Greens Point community. Unafraid. Because it's no longer Guns Point, it's now Greens Point and God's Point. And the reason I brought that to reference is because it happened because of the power of prayer and the power of participation.
Yes.
When people of all colors, races, and creeds came together to pray and participate in the process, possibilities became possible.
All right.
And you're standing here today in a comfort zone because of the power of prayer and the presence of participation. So as we bow to our God, we will bow praying to a God of unlimited possibilities. And what God has done in the Greens Point community, taking Guns Point and making it Greens Point, God will do in the state of Texas and turn it back blue. The power of possibilities. When people come together on one accord, you can bow now because I'm praying now. When people come together on one accord, Father, we thank you right now for the spirit of creativity, for the spirit of unity, and we are decreeing and declaring right now the same change you brought in the Greens Point community, you will bring that change across the state of Texas. We're decreeing, declaring right now, you will cover this state with the color of blue. You will turn this state again to you. So Father, we stand right now unified in the power of prayer and the power of participation, and there will be no unlimited possibilities. Everything that should be shall be. In your name we pray, and we declare in advance victory in Austin, victory in Houston, victory in San Antonio, victory in every city in the state of Texas. We're declaring right now the color blue shall be true, and there shall be no possibilities. Everything shall be according to your will. So we thank you now for bringing us together to win in your name. Amen. As I take my seat again, we welcome you to the Greenhouse International Church in Greens Point under the leadership and direction of the North Houston Business District. When people participate, possibilities become unlimited. God bless you. We love you. Won't you give yourselves a great big hand for your pre-victory? Yes, I'm sorry. Will you all stand? We're going to receive the Spring Independent School District Spring High School ROTC for the presentation of the colors. These young people took their time on a Saturday to come participate in the process, the power of participation. So let's honor them and greet them as they come to present the colors of ROTC of Spring High School.
Color guard, forward, march, right. Left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, color guard, halt, left, face, reset, colors, ready, cut.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carry colors. Ready, cut. Right, face, forward, march, left, right, left, right, left, left, right.
While you are standing, please join me in a moment of silence for those who have sacrificed and those who are currently sacrificing so that we may have the right to free and fair elections. Thank you. I've known Kim Ogg for 20 years. I got here in May of '99, and one of my first stories I did was in the office of the gang. Anti-gang office in the, yeah. That is an important, yeah,
It's an important distinction.
Yeah, it is. I'm glad to be able to do this with you, and then as now, you're able to keep me on track, so I appreciate that. Before we begin, let me go over the ground rules for this afternoon. If this falls again, we're not going to try to put it back up, okay? The moderator will tell you how, and it's not going to stay very long. The moderator will tell you how much time you have to answer each question, usually 1 minute. Signals will be given by the timekeeper at various times. Timekeeper's right there. After stop, you may only complete your sentence, and 15-second rebuttals in case a candidate is attacked personally. The attacked candidate will have, well, one time, 15-second rebuttal. Attacked in love, I'm sure, but attacked nonetheless.
Oh my gosh, he caught me sleeping. After that nice thing about keeping you on track. All right, audience, we ask that you refrain from reacting during the forum. We are live streaming the event, and your audible reactions can make it difficult for the audience to hear. So we appreciate your patience in saving your comments and applause for the end.
By and large, this group of candidates has proven to be pretty well-informed Democrats who are able to state the party line. A lot of people have been having a difficult time differentiating between candidates and have asked for help in drawing out a bigger difference between the candidates, and that's what this forum is designed to do today.
So this afternoon, we'll be asking questions that will really help primary voters make your final decision. This is more of a job interview. Remember, over time, issues change. What we want to know is more about the kind of people that you are. How do you think? And so how you answer the questions will be as important as the answer.
This forum will be divided into 5 easy categories. Number 1, we'll begin with a lightning round. All answers should be limited to 1 or 2 words, or at least not a complete sentence.
Philosophical questions. Instead of asking if you believe in a certain policy or not, these questions ask how you think about a topic.
Questions pertaining to the office of senator. These are policy questions of national importance.
Questions about Texas. These are the questions about how you will advocate for us Texans.
In a unique closing statement, we want to hear your re-election stump speech. Your re-election stump speech. In other words, 6 years from now, what will your stump speech be? We'll want to hear what you were proud of having accomplished during your first term as the junior senator from Texas.
And after the forum, you, the audience, will get a chance to have your questions asked. Just write it down on one of the index cards and hand it in to our team. Remember, if you want us to mention your name, just put it on your card with the question. Now, if everyone is ready, let's get to know our 2020 candidates and see how quick you all are on your feet. All right, this first question, very serious, very important. We're going to start with, who's number 1? You do it down there? Yeah. Amanda? Council member?
Yeah.
Senator? All right, this is a tough one. Do you consider yourself a Texan?
I'm bad.
It's a joke. I didn't write it, but I'm telling you.
Yes. Yes.
Well, you said no the first time. Yes.
C, yes.
Do you consider yourself a Texan in that hat?
Absolutely.
Annie, you consider yourself a Texan?
I consider.
Try it again.
Are we there? Yeah. I consider myself a Tex Annie.
In the context of this election, I consider myself an American first.
I'm a Texan.
Texas through and through.
Very much so.
I'm a Texan.
Make sure that. Oh, it works. All right. So representation matters. Your staff, your campaign staff reflects who you are and what we can expect from you. Question, and we'll start this time with you, Chris. Do you have at least one paid senior advisor on your staff who identifies as trans?
No.
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 Since I don't have any paid senior advisors on my staff, no.
No paid or volunteer staffers that are trans.
Well, because I'm not raising millions of dollars, I do have the LGBTQIA advisors on my campaign, and they are senior advisors.
No.
I do have an LGT campaign manager.
No.
I do have an LGBTQ staffer.
All right, just to clarify, what we're doing is we're coming down the row and we're asking the third person. So
Are we asking about LGBTQ staff or trans staff?
Trans.
Because I have
Trans.
LGBTQ staff, but not trans.
Okay, got it.
Okay. But I think you're the first one to answer this next question.
Yeah.
All right. So, as Democrats, we've been fighting for a living wage, including raising the national minimum wage. Question, panel. If we look at your FEC reports, will we see that when you pay any worker on your campaign, they always receive at least $15 an hour and a 40-hour work week with time and a half above those 40 hours?
You will always see that our staff earns a living wage and has health care and full benefits, as every American worker should have.
We've only had a few paid staffers, and they got paid way more than the livable wage of $15 an hour.
Unless I'm the only paid staffer, then no, I don't. I don't have $15 an hour, and I don't have health care except for through my husband's employer.
I do not have any paid staffers.
I haven't even raised enough to pay myself, let alone my own health insurance plan.
No paid staffers.
I do have 2 paid staffers, and they make more over $15 an hour.
I do have paid staffers, and we pay them sustainable wages as well as healthcare.
I do have paid staff, and they're making over $15 an hour.
I do have paid staff and they're killing me. And yes, they're paid more than that.
Question. Name a Texas activist from a culture other than your own who will vouch for you. Starting with Michael. Question is, name a Texas activist from a culture other than your own who will vouch for you.
Mike Collier, raise your hand. There you go.
Can you explain what you mean by from your other than from your own culture?
From your close-knit environment, from your
Friends group? Are you saying like other people outside of your friends group?
You know, I didn't write the question.
No, I'm confused about the question because I consider Texas my culture, and you're asking me about a Texan outside of my Texan. I'm just confused.
Okay, let's call it your ethnic culture. Let's call it your business culture. Let's call it your close society of friends. Anybody who's outside of what is your normal culture.
Okay.
Do you, without getting into a lot of different things here, if you are, what is your normal place that you call?
So this is a really interesting point that you're making right now, right? Because what am I? I'm just trying.
What do you identify? What is your culture? What do you call your culture? This is the lightning round, by the way.
I'm sorry, but I don't
I
understand the
get it.
question, so I need an explanation.
You gotta do that.
So I would say, you know, my husband is Spanish. I speak Spanish. I identify, but I was born in Minnesota and I'm white.
Okay.
So are you saying that Latino is off limits to me, or you want me to go out? I just don't understand. Outside of my race.
I said range, ma'am.
I just don't. I'm sorry. I
Well,
don't hear you.
that's
Tell you what,
wait.
let's make this
Taylor.
easy, Canberra.
Yeah.
Annie, can you name an advocate for you?
Sure.
Okay, name them.
My husband, my Victor Morales, Heather Nicolette.
Thank you.
Jeffrey Payne.
And for the record, I don't have to pay for anyone to say this, but Candace Weber and Ashton Woods from Black Lives Matter and Houston Rising.
No.
I do not know many activists that stand for transition freedom and nation.
I would say folks like Ryan Lindsay, Mike Webb, others in the LGBTQ community whom I've stood up with issues like Hero.
Senator?
Sylvia Garcia, Carol Alvarado, Hector Flores, Mike Collier, my assistant treasurer.
Douglas.
Brianna Brown, Edna Yang, Marianne De Leon of the LGBTQ.
Excellent. Should the United States institute a universal basic income? I think starting with Cooper.
No, with Annie.
I'm sorry, with Annie. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Perhaps.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Should the United States institute a universal basic income?
Yes.
No.
Yes, an earned basic income.
We should we should be paying our community members sustainable wages so that they can support themselves and their families.
We should be making certain that every American is paid at least $15 an hour, and you can be assured that we'll make it happen.
No, we should raise the minimum wage. That's the way to approach that.
I come out of the labor movement, so I believe the labor movement believes in this country, which is we need a living wage and guaranteed employment in this country, especially as we transition into an economy that is very much going to be based on automation.
I believe in a maximum wage, which means when you teach and educate right, they can maximize their income. From the area I am, they're making $25, $30 an hour, 18 years old.
Thank you.
Canberra, let's apply for jobs down in Beaumont.
I know, something else. All right, question. Adrian, started with you. Question. Which would make you more proud? Being called a progressive Democrat, a moderate Democrat, or something else?
Something else.
A progressive Democrat. And a democratic socialist, and a mom and a human being.
Progressive forward.
I'll say a progressive Democrat.
I would say a progressive pro-growth Democrat so we can expand the tent for everyone.
Testing. I would say a moderate to left Democrat.
The second most progressive Democrat in the race for the United States Senate.
A progressive Democrat, and more importantly, a progressive Texan.
When I ran for lieutenant governor in Dallas area, which I campaigned all over Texas, is huge, they call me the aggressive progressive.
I would say a pragmatic progressive, because I have very strong progressive values, but I also feel like we need to be pragmatic about how we get things done, and we need to make sure that we can afford to do it, which we can because we're the richest country in the history of the world.
All right, we start with you, Adrian. In one or two words.
No.
I'm sorry, wrong name?
Yeah. Next.
Sema.
With Sema.
Sema.
We're fine with it.
Sema.
In one or two words, which issue do you want the audience to remember you for?
1 or 2 words.
2 or 1?
Repeat the question. I want to be remembered for the Green New Deal and Medicare for all. And those are a lot of words, so.
Working and retired.
Immigration and border security.
What?
Healthcare access and economic opportunity.
Healthcare and education.
Guns and climate change.
Universal health care and building an economy that works for every single American.
Healthcare, education, and the person you vote for.
Inspiring people again in the goodness of government and creating a Congress that's truly representative of the people, not in terms of just ethnicity, but also in socioeconomic status, gender identity, every which way that we categorize ourselves.
Changing the perspective of how we think about all issues.
I think we're there.
More than 1 or 2. I think.
All right. We've seen what happens when, Mr. Foster, we'll go with you first. We've seen what happens when we elect officials who don't read. Name. I didn't make the questions up, I'm just reading the questions. I'm a hired hand, I'm just, right? I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, make sure.
But what are those call letters again?
KPRC. We've seen what happens when we elect officials who don't read. Question. Name one book written in the last 30 to 40 years that you have read and would recommend to the audience.
The Fundamentals of Economics, Thomas Sowell.
Oh, God.
Drift, The Unborn of American Military by Rachel Redow.
Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath. I of course would be David, and John Cornyn is Goliath.
Lynches on the courthouse steps.
Master of the Senate by Robert Caro.
Okay.
Last Man Standing, a biography of the Black Panther Geronimo Pratt that was wrongfully imprisoned for 27 years by the United States government.
The #1 bestseller, the Bible.
She said by Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey.
You can read Grant, you can read Washington, you can also Think Fast, Think Slow by Daniel Kahneman, Good Economics in Hard Times, which is just published by 2 of our Nobel Prize winning laureates.
Just need one book.
Misbehaving. There are multiple books. It's time for a lot of us to start reading a whole lot more.
Well, Michael Cooper, I'm offended. That was my book, the Bible. So, thank you. But it wasn't written over 20, 30 years ago. They always change words to just fit the narrative, right? You gotta switch that.
All right. In a very serious vein, a Texas team is in the finals, and a senator from the other state has made a bet with you. They will send you their best food item if they win for you to eat on social media. The big question is, when the Texas team wins, that's when, not if, which city tacos will you send on behalf of Texas? I don't write the questions either. It's another joke, Jaime. I'm trying to deliver it here. So we start with you, Victor.
What was the question?
Where are you going to send tacos from? What Texas city are you going to send? Let's see, where is it? Which city's tacos will you send on behalf of Texas?
Well, I think it's to pick anything bad, so I'd go with San Antonio. Or Houston.
You know I have to say Houston.
You better say Houston.
I'd say Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, all of us get Texas.
He's adding up the percentages to 50.
I would say Houston, but I reserve the right to change my answer if I go to a different city.
They're gonna come from my kitchen, the best Nopales tacos in Texas.
I would say Beaumont to represent where I'm from, but after finding out they're Democrats in the Woodlands, I say the Woodlands.
Tacos Del Julio on Airline Drive.
I love y'all in Houston, but y'all got nothing on El Paso. Sorry.
Well, I've traveled across Texas, and I can tell you, Brownsville, Texas has the best tacos called Ultimo Taco in Brownsville. And it's a competition between Ultimo Taco and Sweet Cake, so they're both delicious, and that's where I'd go.
I always run into Taco Cabana.
When Captain Fox was closed?
Thank you. Well, you all want us to get to know you, but how well do you know each other? Question. Name the primary candidate who will support you when you get into the runoffs and they don't.
Okay, there you go. Because I know that all 12 candidates believe that we have to beat John Cornyn because he has been standing against the interests of Texans. I think every single one of us would support the other should the other nominee be selected in the election. So I would say everybody.
I concur. Oh, excuse me. I'm hoarse. That's why I sound like this. I concur that I will support. If for some reason I don't make the runoffs, I'll make certain I support whoever makes the runoffs, because as the pastor said, we have to stand on one accord.
Because you're thinking about this, I can see.
I am, and I'm just figuring out how to evade the question like they do. We've all got to be good friends, and I like a lot of the people up here, and it's a talented field, and that's why nobody wants to answer, because nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings, and I don't do either.
I know from every candidate that I've talked to that we would all support each other.
Why change it? We would absolutely support each other. We've all become great friends.
I know Selma would support me.
I just met Annie. I just met Victor yesterday at an event we were at. Getting to know Chris some, getting to know our senator some, Christina. In terms of folks that I have a longer relationship with, Michael Cooper and Selma, I think both of them would support me.
And no lie, I like a lot of the people up here. They're very nice people. Some of them are more genuine than others, but we're not measuring right now. I'm gonna support the nominee, whomever the nominee is. And although we may not always agree on certain issues, we are gonna work together to defeat John Cornyn, and that is the objective.
That's right.
Describe it as a friendly, intense difference, but we support one another.
It's funny, on the drive over here from the airport, I was thinking beyond the primary, and I was thinking whoever the winner is, we'd have to support that person. And in that thought, I was thinking we need a message to Texas where every candidate comes up and we have a message. In the message, a sentence or two is said by each candidate, and in the end, the winner of the primary steps up and gives the final message and show our unity moving forward. And that's what I was thinking on the way over here, because the camaraderie of all the candidates, it's just nice. I met Annie today. This is only my second event. I'm sorry I'm late for the party. But I mean, I feel like these people are friends. We're emailing each other. I'm giving them my personal email, which I don't really do to a lot of people. I mean, it's really nice people. Most of them. No, they all are. Nobody's been in the room. But and that's what I thought. I would think that in the end, we make a commercial where we show Texas, hey, we fought, we've got a winner, and we come together and we're supporting that person. And we put it out there to everybody, so the Democrats can
Thank you, Victor.
Everybody can see it.
All right, we're moving to philosophical questions. These are going to be 1-minute answers each. Our timekeepers are armed. So, stick with your 1-minute answers. Let's talk philosophy. How do you decide when there is too much regulation or not enough regulation? Back to you, Senator.
The way you make that decision, first of all, let's make sure we put it in the proper frame of reference. I've had the opportunity to serve as your state senator for the past 26 years. And I've had to make certain that I balance that in the state of Texas. We've got to make certain that let's talk the economy. We've got to make certain that we incentivize the economy in order to create jobs. But when we see a particular industry that's kind of being overbearing, as an example, the drug industry, you know which drugs I'm talking about. I'm talking about prescription drugs. We've got to make certain that we do everything in our power to rein in that cost, to make certain that it's affordable. That's a good example of where we need more regulation in order to control prices in this country.
One thing I've always found very interesting, if we go back to 2008 and the financial meltdown that America went through, one reason that Texas was somewhat spared during that time was because of the regulations we have in place when it comes to the housing industry. And in a state where the Republicans always like to decry and criticize regulations, it's interesting that that saved our bacon in that particular instance. Obviously, regulations are needed, and I'll tell you when it's not the right time. It's not the right time after crisis has hit. And that's what we seem to do in the United States. We wait until a crisis hits, and then we decide we want to add a lot of regulations, and it makes no sense whatsoever. Instead, when we see problems, we need to address those as quickly as possible.
So I believe that government can be a force for good in our lives, and that we create rules to protect consumers, people, and the planet, and to level the playing field for honest businesses. So I spent a decade in this state advocating and raising standards for construction workers. We have some of the lowest standards and regulations for the people who build our schools, our homes, and roadways, and it led to us being the most deadly place for construction workers in the country. I passed laws at the local and state level that some people said was too much, but in this state, we didn't even have the right to paid rest breaks for construction workers, even though they work outside in 100-degree heat. I'm proud that I've often seen where we need rules and regulations to protect people, workers, and our planet, and I believe that that is my core function when I go to Washington.
I believe you have to keep a balance on regulations. I became a politician because of too much regulations in the state of Texas. We have a governor by the name of Greg Abbott that appointed Mike Morath. Boo, that's right. Mike Morath as your education commissioner, and when he was appointed, he did not even have a degree. And you have superintendents and PhDs underneath him that were better qualified for the position. They have been taking over school districts all across the state of Texas. In Beaumont, where I'm from, in Houston, there were threats. In Dallas, Texas, there were threats. Too much regulations by the government of the state of Texas to do something that we can do ourselves. And too much regulations on charter schools. Absolutely not. Too much regulation is not good for our society nor our kids. Prime example.
So this is a really excellent question, and it has me thinking. So when we're talking about regulation, we're actually talking about government involvement, and the question is, when is there too much government involvement, or when is there not enough government involvement? And it really depends on what you think government involvement is supposed to do. Is it a force of good or not? And the question is really about people. Government should be responsive to the people. And when there's situations that arise where government isn't responsive to the people, then that is obviously a situation where you need more of it. Gun control. This is a perfect example of where we need more government involvement. We are outliers in this country. 40,000 people every year die from gun violence. And any other country in the industrialized world, we lose more people in a week than most countries lose in a year. And this is an example where government involvement must be increased. You can counterbalance that with business. There are a lot of instances where we could do much more. Entrepreneurship could be much greater if government would get off of our necks.
I think about it from an economic standpoint. The Democrats like to talk about free market economics quite a bit, but there is a role for government when the free market creates a market that is inefficient and not regulating price. Healthcare and education are two areas where we know the private sector is not regulating price very well. It is not doing what it's supposed to do. The question is, how do we invent regulation that actually starts working? One of the books I recommended was Misbehaving, which is by Robert Thaler, who does behavioral economics. The challenge that we're facing is how do we look at behavioral economics on a macroeconomic scale, which is to look at how do we affect policy changes that aren't hard regulation, but nudging people, changing behavioral thought, and we want to do that in industry. So we have to start developing models to do that. This is a very large historic complication, and it's a fight between the old Chicago School of Economics and newer behavioral economic school of thought. And you have to know that in order to put up this fight.
Thank you.
Exactly.
All right, well, you're asking someone who lives in a sacrifice zone alongside all the petrochemical industries. And in order to regulate these industries, even the pharmaceutical industry and medical industry and the arms and weapons manufacturers, you have to not be bought by them. You do not accept or solicit donations from those lobbying companies that will prohibit you as a senator who's representing the people from regulating them. So that is how I would operate, and what I would do philosophically and realistically is I would not accept any donations from the pharmaceutical industries, from big industries, to prevent regulation from taking place. This would help people in our communities, Black and brown communities, from being impacted from environmental emissions that are causing cancer clusters in our communities and are impacting the quality of healthcare that we receive in our healthcare systems, because we do not have a control over how much healthcare costs in this country.
Thank you.
When Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell states that a regular person can basically, do better in another OECD country, we have a problem. When you what was it called? I just read that. It's data stat line analysis. They said that Texas has 83 out of 254 poverty. I'm talking about 83 counties increased in poverty out of 254 counties. We got serious problems at home that can be taken care of with regulation, with federal legislation. I'm passionate about, retired and working people. They got to be able to make ends meet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Too much regulation, not enough regulation. By the time you see it, if you're in DC, it's too late. It's the people on the ground who know if there's too much regulation, not enough regulation, which is why I support unions. Strong unions that can advocate when regulations are too harsh or there's not enough regulations to support the people. So that's the point. Not in DC, it's got to be in the ground, the people working the jail.
There's always a balancing act between what we put out as regulations and what are the outcomes that we produce. And I think you have to start from a paradigm of examining what are the intended outcomes for people. How do you best help them to thrive? How do you help them to grow? How do you keep them protected? And when we look at that from a variety of sorts, I'll take, for example, our region in the Gulf Coast and looking at infrastructure and the floods and how do we mitigate properly through regulation the harms that people face when they have such tragedies taking place, like 51 inches of rainfall that fell across our region after Harvey. Those are the things that require us to take a second look and to regulate appropriately. When we look at access to health care and looking at the cost of prescription drugs, or looking at the way in which our billing is not transparent, the end goal here is to make sure that people are protected and they have access to the opportunity that we should be striving for all Americans.
Thank you.
Thank you. A reminder for the audience, remember that if you want to ask a question, you turn in your index cards now and throughout the afternoon. Remember to put your name if you'd like to be given credit for that. And thank you to the AKAs, Alpha Kappa Alpha women, who are serving as hostess today. You can see them in a lovely pink. Thank you for what you are doing. This question starts with you, Chris. Which is more important? Remember, one minute answers each. Which is more important, American jobs or free trade?
Well, both are very important, but I think American jobs are the most important. And we've seen that over time, and a lot of the trade agreements that were put in place were very costly regarding American jobs, and we paid the price for that. And so going forward, I think we need to be very conscious of that and make sure that we continue to work toward full employment whenever we can here in the United States of America. So definitely, I think American jobs are the most important.
So I spent time working for the United Auto Workers under the North American Free Trade Agreement. We lost over 1 million manufacturing jobs in this country, good, mostly union jobs. And I also spent time working with immigrants that came to this country because NAFTA disrupted the agricultural industry in Mexico and the economy, causing millions of people to migrate to the United States. When we talk about trade policies, it needs to not just look at what the profit margin will be for corporations, but unions need to be at the negotiating table, agricultural organizations need to be at the table, and environmental organizations. We need to make sure that we are operating from a level playing field in each country so that we do not bring down wages and bring down environmental standards in the process.
I'm absolutely for American jobs. I've been in the automotive industry executive manager for the past 30 years. I'm also a General Motors dealer candidate. I can actually purchase any franchise, but I choose to go with General Motors because of the financing program. Done some research in the background of that. The average union, for our union workers, the reason why they started looking at free trade and looking at trades because in America it's $76 an hour to pay someone to work on that same vehicle to build it across the seas or nation's line. It's $36 an hour. So that's why they were trying to look at an average there. But we need to protect our union workers. I was so excited that they came up with a trade deal when General Motors came off a strike. And we need to make sure that we do not lose sight on our local folks here in the United States.
I think it's an interesting question in the way that it's framed because I don't see it as a zero sum or a binary decision. You don't choose American jobs or free trade. The two go hand in hand. Free trade can create American jobs, good American jobs. It's not just about an American job. It's about an American job, one paycheck that lets you live a life of dignity. That's the important thing, and that should be our goal. And how we get there, I think, absolutely requires that we integrate free trade in it. We're a global economy. I mean, the way that we get things done is by leveraging all of the amazing access we have now to other cultures and other workforces and other skill sets, and that can only help us do better here in the United States. And so I want to absolutely American jobs that cover people, that they can have real lives with vacations and paid maternity leave and time with their families on one single paycheck. But we can do that with through a global economy.
I agree it's not a binary decision, but for different reasons. It's kind of an old question because I think when NAFTA first got started, we manufactured quite a bit. Automation and information technology hadn't really squeezed the labor out of a lot of processes, and that's what we're seeing. That's largely why you see Andrew Yang's candidacy take off here, because that argument is a very strong argument. So even now, if you're trying to reverse trade and some of the detriment of what our trade policy did, it's not going to necessarily result in increasing jobs in our country. we've got to just start thinking a lot critically about this. But what I will say is NAFTA is a good example of what happens when you don't have funding for looking at those second and third level impacts. You have a good policy, good intention, but we didn't fund the rest of it. And I would say to you that a part of our platform that we need to watch out for is doing higher regulation in the oil and gas sector, right? We have to fund that displacement of labor as well, but we're going to have to do that for our environment. But it's a lesson learned that we learned from NAFTA and then we apply it to our policy as well. Thank you, sorry.
So for me, it's going to always be a fair trade agreement to ensure that our jobs in America are no longer outsourced to companies to countries in other parts of the world for cheap labor. What we want to do is create a global economy in which other countries can buy our supplies as well as we can buy theirs and what they manufacture, including in these fair trade agreements that I support is ensuring that other countries are abiding by certain environmental standards and working conditions that elevate people out of poverty in their countries. That way we don't see this constant economic collapse or economic sanctions being placed on other countries because certain countries are not playing by the same rules created by American imperialism. So when we talk about American jobs, it's also tied to the trade agreements that we have and ensuring that Congress takes back the power to negotiate these deals in Congress, not at the hands of a president, will ensure that we also have a functioning Congress that no longer has ties to making money from those contract deals.
I will always selfishly say American jobs. The greatest piece of legislation we ever passed in this country was the GI Bill. The GI Bill created skills for workers. They turned out to be high-paying jobs. We invested in people. And that's what I want to do. I want to take it and do it on the county level where, working folk and retired citizens are able to invest in people and get skills. Welding, plumbing, electrical, wind turbine technology, solar panel technology, water technology, all the skills that we haven't even thought of yet. But you finance it and you get paid for it. You deserve it. You can't get your money out of the government. It's time for you to be able to get some of your money back. Go to my website, www.votejackdaniels.com, and take a look at what I'm talking about, and I'll be passing it out back there. Thank you.
I would select jobs every time. Jobs and trade deals are not exclusive to each other. We need jobs for the people to have money to be able to pay for the things that they want. We need trade deals for them to have choices on what they purchase. The way you get both is jobs are diversified through education. Greater education provides more intellectual workforce, more jobs, more higher paying jobs, and that could go across everybody. And if we're going to talk about climate change in the future, we're going to lose jobs in Texas. So we need to start educating our people in more tech skills so that they can provide support once the fossil fuels stop getting used.
I strongly believe that America succeeds when, I think it's where I'm sitting, y'all. I strongly believe that America succeeds when its people can succeed, and its people can succeed when they have ways to support themselves and their families. And with that being said, we have to make sure that we are preserving and creating new job opportunities for Americans, but not just thinking about it just in the guise of trade policy. Because what the statistics show is that people have more anxiety about what we call future of work in today's society, which means the automation that's coming underway and the innovation and technological changes than they do of foreign competition. And so what we need is a comprehensive, systematic approach to how we provide people with upward mobility opportunities within the industries that they already exist in today. Workforce training credits, for example, if you are in an advanced manufacturing context, you shouldn't just have to get a pink slip when the technology changes at your job.
I firmly believe that we need to make certain that American jobs are first. to the extent that we deal with issues concerning free trade, I want to make certain that unions are part of that decision-making process concerning those trade agreements. The reality is that yes, we have some industries that have come under pressure, and in many instances, we need to make certain that we provide resources in order to retrain those workers. And I'm all for that in terms of making certain that if an industry is going away, then we need to make certain that persons in that industry get an opportunity to retrain. We've got to have balance in order to make certain that this miracle that we call the Texas economy and also the national economy continues to move forward.
Thank you, Senator.
Job of the senator, what is it? Policy questions, 1 minute answers each, please. So for this round, we're going to talk policy. What does the Second Amendment say, and what should gun policy look like?
So I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I don't mean to make anyone jealous, but I am the best shot in my family. But I also graduated high school the year of the Columbine shooting. And I've been waiting my entire adult life to see Congress act and do very basic things like pass universal background checks and ban assault-style weapons. But instead, we decided to teach a generation of children to learn how to play dead in their classrooms. That, to our legislators, seemed like the more reasonable solution. So I support the peace plan put forward and created by the young people out of Stoneman Douglas High School that has some of the most well thought out proposals about how we deal with the epidemic of gun violence in our country. And I want to lead on this issue in the Senate, and I'm very proud that I have not have any intention of ever taking any NRA contributions, because I want to enact in the best interest of American families.
Although we have the right to bear arms, we shouldn't have AK-47s. You don't need that to go hunt Bambi. That's ridiculous. We need to change our gun laws. We need to get rid of the loopholes. We need to make sure that we have more strategic background check. And one of the things I also proposed was, because the last young man, I think he was like 25 years of age, that drove from Allen, Texas, all the way to El Paso, you had to be pretty twisted or angry to maintain that hype to go and kill 22 people. One of those people was attempted murder was Michelle, which is Pastor Michael's daughter. Found myself in El Paso yet again, probably 15, 20 times now. And because of the ignorance of understanding the gun laws change that we need better background check. And I even want to go back and look at conduct grades for teenagers, because we find out that most of those folks in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I'm out of time. Thank you.
So I'm just going to repeat what I wrote out in a press release after the White Settlement shooting that I attached along with my response to the NRA candidate questionnaire. And I highlight on every page what our gun deaths in a certain time period were compared to other countries. We are an outlier in this respect. There's no good reason for it other than the fact that we failed to regulate guns. Why? The Second Amendment, let's talk about it. Preceding the Second Amendment is our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is what is being sacrificed here in the name of gun profits for manufacturers. It's a very easy equation. Political power is being traded for access to gun profits, and we're paying the price in blood. So my proposal is we got to do everything, the low-hanging fruit, but in addition, we got to get clever. I want credit card companies to not go and finance the gun purchases. They don't do it for bitcoins. They shouldn't be doing it for guns. And in addition, gun owners should be carrying liability insurance so that we're no longer externalizing the cost of these mass shootings.
At my first forum in this race, I introduced a concept called the 20% minority rule. And what that means is a lot of times Democrats pass policy and they say, oh, well, look, Ms. McConnell's sitting on it. So we also have to talk about how government actually works and how we can get it to work a little bit better. My proposal is to put a 20% minority rule where the minority in any given house would have control of 20% of the agenda. And you can imagine that once we have passed universal background checks, that in the Senate, Chuck Schumer would have been able to introduce legislation that already had passed the House if we control 20% of the agenda. So on a lot of issues, we need to start thinking about how Congress itself works, and introducing these types of things gets us from just kind of advocating how strongly we believe about something and actually getting stuff moving on it. In terms of NRA contributions, I would accept them absolutely, preferably in the amount of their annual budget.
Well, I can tell you that as someone who has grown up in the country, I've gone hunting myself. I know how to shoot. I know how to load a gun. I know what they're for, and I'd be really. And I'm running out of time, but if I don't mention this right now, like someone who uses the excuse of using an AK-47 or semi-automatic weapon to go hunting is ridiculous, because that's not what it's for. Those guns were intended to cause mass casualties, to cause massive deaths, and they were created for war. And although I am one who understands and knows this and has gone hunting and does this, I do not support or accept any money from the NRA. Two, I believe that Congress has the power to regulate the gun industry using the Commerce Clause. Why they haven't done it is beyond me, but that is the way that we can regulate and end the manufacturing of this kind of ammunition that weaponizes these weapons of war and puts them on the street.
All the people I know are responsible gun owners. You know, I stay in a rural community in Chambers County. Everybody has guns, you know, no doubt about it. But please do not let your passions control reason. Because, you know, being realistic, you know, in the United States Senate, it's gonna have to be incremental change. You're not gonna be able to get what you want, you know what I mean? And people gotta be careful, especially with, you know, up here. I mean, you're running for the United States Senate, you wind up, you know, becoming the nominee, you may be facing what you said up here. You know, so you got to be careful on what you're talking about. You know, I want all the things, you know, that'll keep us safe. Particularly, I want smart gun technology. I want to pressure those manufacturers. You know, those triggers, you better have, you know, your fingerprint on there. Thank you.
I've been in the military 34 years, probably be another 6 more years in it. Been around guns a lot. And I can definitely tell you that people up here don't know what they're talking about when they talk about assault rifles. Assault rifles are illegal in the United States. So what you're looking at is scary hunting rifles. Albeit, if you go to get a Remington 30-06, that causes more damage than the AR-15. So it's not about regulating guns for gun owners who are responsible. It's about regulating those people who are not responsible. I would say that every individual who wants to own a gun or owns a gun needs to get a right to purchase permit from the government at a low cost, so that even people who are low economic areas can afford to protect themselves or go hunting. I'm a life member of the NRA. I support their education system. I don't support their political agenda. But I think the easy answer is take guns away. It's not it. It's mental health in schools.
Well, my opponent, John Cornyn, has an A+ rating from the NRA, and I often say that I've made some good grades in my lifetime, but an A+ rating from the NRA is not going to be one of them. What's important is that we think about what's in the balance. And yes, the Second Amendment is a very real right in which people have access to bear arms, but the question is it unfettered? Should we continue to see mass shootings on our watches? I have lost one of my loved ones to gun violence. And so how many people, how many children, how many times do we go to grocery stores but in fear for our lives before someone has the courage to lead? And so that question I think we must answer through a switch in leadership. John Cornyn has talked about it being complex. Well, I have news. If you are not ready for complex issue, then you are not ready to be the U.S. Senator serving in this seat.
I have been working on this gun issue since Ann Richards was governor of the state of Texas. I worked with Governor Richards to make certain that we initially defeated the concealed carry law. I was the first senator, a legislator, to file a bill in order to ban assault weapons. Background checks, reducing the size of magazines, and I've worked on mental health issues. And so we can make certain that we maintain the intent of the Second Amendment, but we must make certain that Moms Demand Action, that we work with them on legislation that makes sense in terms of guns. You shouldn't have to walk down the street. You shouldn't have to worry about whether or not your children are going to go to school and come home based on what's going on. In Dallas, we had a 1-year-old that was shot and killed while sleeping in bed. And so it's not just issues in terms of guns, it's also mental illness, and we need to do something about it. Thank you.
I don't have a problem with the Second Amendment. I have a problem with the people who continue to mischaracterize the Second Amendment and suggest that we can't make certain guns illegal. We've made certain guns illegal in the United States for centuries now. Machine guns, sawed-off shotguns. And after the shooting in Parkland, I wrote an op-ed for the Houston Chronicle because I had had enough. I've had enough of the insanity, and I advocated for a ban and buyback program, passion after what they've done in Australia. And it should be mandatory. And no issue demonstrates the brokenness of our democracy any more than the gun debate. When 80 to 90% of the people in the United States want red flag laws and universal background checks, and Congress still refuses to act, something is very broken, something is very wrong, and it's all because of the NRA that only represents 6% of gun owners in the United States of America. Well, the good news is Moms Demand Action is now raising more than the NRA, and they're not going to stop until we do something serious about gun violence in the
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Starting with you, Michael. What is the role, 1 minute, what is the role of law enforcement, and how does America heal?
Well, thank you for the question, because I'm the president of the Beaumont chapter NAACP, and I have started a partnership with our chief of police. And we have 101s. We go into their office, they come and visit us. And it should be a partnership in the community. We've had senseless killings at Alice Keys Park right there in Beaumont, Texas. It made national headlines. 4 people died at one time. So we came back to the community, and I am also a psychologist. So I told him, I said, we have unmanaged anger, which turns into homicide. And we're also looking at the partnership to where they're involved when it's not always a crime, but they're in the communities, bringing in the information and bringing up the updates and letting them know that we are partners in this together. So we need to see our police force in the communities when there's peace, not only when there's chaos. So it's a partnership. That's what it takes.
Yes. What is the role of law enforcement, and how does America heal?
I'm assuming this goes to the violence. So law enforcement, the role of law enforcement, I would think, is to protect people, just generally speaking, and to enforce the laws. It's pretty simple, but then when you apply it to our society, our very diverse society with everything going on, and the fact that they probably don't get the support that they need. Budgets have been slashed all over the place. It comes out of somebody's paycheck, or it comes out of somebody's budget. And so I think we need to do a better job of appreciating our police, the jobs that police do in our society. We also need to educate them, because there are biases built in, and that ultimately result in injustice happening way too frequently. And so I think that the approach needs to be that we work together, understanding that if we have the best of intentions, if we can have an honest conversation about what's going on, and people are willing to change, and we put money behind it. A lot of these problems that we're talking about, they come from a place where there's a lack of funding.
If you haven't read already, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell is an important book to read. It talks a lot about this in terms of coupling of issues, and it's a coupling of, in most major cities, a lot of people don't know this, you can actually figure out how much crime by 5% of your location. They can get it by census codes. So 5% of the geographic area of any major city actually accounts for something over 70% of crimes in that city. This was done in Cleveland, and what that did is it set an establishment that we were going to couple and stop people in those zip codes and pull them over to try to gain weapons. And it had a dramatic effect on the reduction of crime in Cleveland. Unfortunately, the police unions all over the country misinterpreted that and forgot the very important coupling piece. So they adopted a philosophy of pulling people over for a lot of things in all areas, not just the 5% geographic area. So it's an important book to read.
Thank you.
So the role of law enforcement is supposed to be to serve and protect. It's supposed to be an honorable job. And most of our police officers, if not a lot of them, do that every day. They put their lives on the line for our safety. There are those, however, who abuse their power and they target people because they have to meet certain quotas that were initiated by the crime bill, which created an incentive to criminalize Black and brown people and causing mass incarceration across the entire nation. How many of you in here are afraid whenever you get pulled over by a police officer? How many of you here have been arrested before? Okay, so some of us don't get to choose what color skin we are or whether we are more white or more Mexican than others. We don't have that kind of privilege to do that. And when we are being targeted, we fear for our lives. So, you know, it's no joke what happens to us in our communities, but we have to repeal the Crime Act and start dismantling systemic racism in every institution.
I believe that we should have community policing coupled with, the working and retired citizens, incentivized to help people. It's putting people to work, giving them dignity is what matters. You know what? The tool that ISIS use is the same as those hate Nazi groups or whatever. They see the weakness and they go after it, and they're usually impoverished. They have no skills or no trades. They're down, on their luck, and it just nothing going right. Their family life is in trouble, in crisis, and they pick up on that. If I can give you an incentive to help people, all the communities in Texas, all the counties in Texas, 254 of them, we'll see a dramatic change when you get paid for it.
Thank you. What is the role of law enforcement and how does America heal?
So policing, to serve and protect. These police officers, they come from our communities. There are football players in high school, graduate from high school, other athletes, there are neighbors, our kids, our daughters, our sons. They're us. They put on the uniform to serve a noble calling. But we're selling them short because we're not giving them training that they need. They need live situational training so that when they come into a situation that if they hadn't received the training, might end up bad. But they've got the training, they know how to react, and they're trained properly. They're not bad people, but they seem to be bad people because they're poorly trained. And we need to invest in our policing, because if they go away, then it's chaos and we're all out there on our own by ourselves. As bad as it is to get pulled over, sometimes they pull over some bad guys. So I think they need more training and more support.
Thank you.
As a local elected official, having been part of this discussion on how we create a paradigm that works for all of us as a community when it ties to policing, I think one of the things you hear talked about most is community policing. And what that means is basically making sure that you have a law enforcement community that is actually part of the community, so that, for example, you might know the difference between Miss Johnson's grandson and someone who's there to do Miss Johnson harm. And that is only something you come about by virtue of you being physically part of those communities. Now, that doesn't come for free. we have to pay for that. So as a senator, as your next U.S. senator, I will make sure that there will be more grant dollars made available, not just for more police, but also for more training. You have to make split-second decisions, and it has to make sure that we have to make sure that we have properly vetted who we allow to be officers who protect and serve the communities that we love and embrace.
Thank you.
I agree with the concept. I agree with the concept of community policing because you've got to make certain that those police officers know the people in the community. There may very well be a person with a mental illness problem. And if that police officer knows the people in the community, their first instinct won't be to shoot and kill that person. And we've got to also make sure that there's accountability and transparency. That's why I passed the body cameras law. And you've seen what that has done in terms of transparency and also holding police officers accountable. We've got to also make certain that police departments certify that when they send evidence to the district attorney's office, they're sending all of the evidence and not just hiding the evidence. If we do that, then we're going to make certain that there's trust that can be restored with police and also our community.
Well, I think much of it comes down to training and making sure that police officers know how to deal with the various tense situations they are going to face, not only with the mentally ill, but other tense situations as well. And if during that training process an individual demonstrates any type of racist tendencies, they obviously shouldn't be hired because that's going to lead to problems down the line. But that decision obviously rests within the individual police departments. I do think that we really do need to focus on the healing. We need to continue to have a very serious discussion about criminal justice reform. Years ago, we decided that we were going to criminalize all sorts of behaviors. Instead of recognizing that people were addicts, we were going to treat them like criminals. And because of the systemic racism that exists in our society, minority communities were certainly harmed to a much greater degree, and we ended up locking away generations of young people. We need to move away from that. We need to address it and have a very honest discussion.
Thank you, Chris.
May I respond to something? No? Okay.
It's if you were personally attacked by someone, that was the ground rules. Okay. Otherwise, people would be wanting to respond back and forth, and so that's why.
That's good to know. Because if not, like I felt like it was a debate. Like if someone attacks you or something that you said, then you go after them. But I'll settle that later.
Thank you.
You know, policing is just one aspect that we need to reform in our criminal justice system. We need to overhaul our entire criminal justice system. We have more people incarcerated in this country than any other industrialized nation on the planet. 2.2 million people locked up in this country. Well, how did we get here? We got here by building a system that was more concerned with retribution than with justice. We got here by building a system that disproportionately targets the poor and communities of color. We got here by building a system that was willing to treat drug addiction like a crime instead of an actual need of mental health and health services. And we got here by building a system where people like John Boehner, our former Speaker of the House, now sits on a cannabis corporation, investment corporation, where he is making money off of the same product that he said should be illegal. And now there are still hundreds of thousands of people locked up for that same, selling that same product. So that's why I've endorsed Ayanna Pressley's People's Justice Guaranteed, the most comprehensive plan to overhaul our criminal justice system in the country right now.
Thank you.
Kim, you have that.
I do. Folks, we have moved into overtime. This means we're going to cut to a local question. Canberra, I've been asked to take number 2. And so let's give it, and you know where we are. We're at the bottom of page 13. All right, candidates. Yesterday, Governor Abbott declared that Texas will not resettle refugees in 2020. Boo. What is America's responsibility to refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, and humanity? Annie?
Yeah.
Immigration is very personal to me as an attorney. I practice pro bono law. In fact, just down the street on Green Road here, there's a facility where they held my first client for 8 months. We got her asylum. It took 8 months though, and she was very poorly treated throughout the time, and she still has health issues because of it. What we're doing to our immigrants, we're a country of immigrants. America is exceptional because of our diversity. And so not only is it inhumane and it hurts people, but it's counterproductive for our own success. And to go and refuse people entry to our country, to refuse people who have suffered, and we have agreements all over the world that we're going to do this, reciprocity, and yet we don't honor them. It's also irresponsible, and it makes us a bad actor on a global scale.
Thank you.
I look at it as an international issue as well. Normally when you have the number of refugees that we've received, that tells you that governments, our sister governments, Mexico, Central America, South America, those governments are failing. So in addition to looking at how do we establish a place for the refugees that are here, whether it's on a temporary basis or a longer term basis, we need to look at international policy, which is looking at what we're doing at the UN, funding diplomatic relations and working towards curbing corruption in Central America and South America, which doesn't make those governments sustainable and forces there to be an exodus from those countries. Most people don't like to move. They don't have to. I mean, they don't. If they can live, they don't move. So when you see the increase in refugees, it should tell you we have a problem, and it's a failure of governments that we need to solve as well. You can go back to the Monroe Doctrine, where the United States had a different view of what our role was in the hemisphere. We were supposed to lead, and we were supposed to solve problems in our hemisphere, and we didn't want influence from Europe.
Well, I think we need to remind Governor Greg Abbott that someone's eventually going to replace him in the next election for governor. So let's look forward to that. Too, our country is already violating immigration laws that we have on the books and international asylum laws that we continuously violate, just specifically after the Patriot Act was initiated and after we created the institution of ICE in 2003. So we are repeatedly causing and inflicting these wars and economic sanctions and passing trade deals that decimate other economies in other countries. And when people are coming to our borders to seek refuge because of the damage that this country has done because of those who are in Congress are governing in such a way that is so destructive to benefit themselves. And now we have this. We have to put in place people who are not going to support these kinds of policies that are against humanity. Literally, we should be accepting the refugees coming to our borders because this is the damage that we've inflicted over 4 decades, 40 years of neoliberal policies.
Thank you.
One of the main reasons we have the Northern Triangle anyway is because of soil erosion. They can't grow any food, they can't sustain themselves. But refugees in general, I don't see, but let me just say this. As your U.S. Senator, I would be doing some serious back channeling with the governor and the lieutenant governor. Trying to figure out a way. We need to be able to get people in here because my economic model, irregardless if they are able to stay through asylum hearings, they can get some skilled trades here. But guess what? They're gonna get their skilled trades through the counties where people who have money, own homes and land, can invest in these people and get their money back. That's what this is all about. Everything I would do is based on getting working and retired citizens who own land and homes the ability to make their money back. You get no money back right now. You need it.
Thank you.
Less than a month ago, I was in Africa. I was in Africa for almost 14 months, helping partner nations with their refugee issues. Every time I did battlefield circulation past refugee camps, these poor countries are accepting refugees. There's absolutely no reason why the United States, as rich as we are, cannot accept refugees. We're the shining light of the world. Everybody wants to come to America because there's opportunity. And we should allow these people to have the same opportunities. There's absolutely no reason why we should be breaking international law and not accepting these refugees, but these other countries, including Europe, are accepting them.
President Trump's, okay, it's working. President Trump's executive order that would enable Governor Abbott to take the stance that he's taken is indicative of a few things. One, it's inconsistent with our American values to protect and preserve human rights. Two, it's an illustration of how much we need real leaders in office who will have the courage to embark upon a journey of comprehensive immigration reform rather than just having president after president have executive orders in which they decide who comes and who goes in this country. Now, Houston being my home, which is home to 142 different languages spoken, Gulfton, where most of our refugees do go and start to try to make a life for themselves here. I am horrified by this particular stance in which Governor Abbott is placing politics over people and making sure that he's sending political messages rather than doing what's right by the people that we serve.
The immigration system of this country is broken. How in the world can we have an immigration system where we're taking kids and putting them in cages? This president, this man is doing these things. And then he ends up with an executive order concerning refugees. And Governor Abbott is the first governor in the country to announce that we will no longer accept refugees in the state of Texas. But I'm telling you this, and I'll tell the governor this also. The reality is, if we get out and do what we need to do in November, Greg Abbott will get the message and we'll be able to turn around Texas and make certain that this country is turned around in terms of that president so we can have holistic integration reform in this country.
More refugees have settled in the state of Texas than any other state in the entire country. Instead of standing up and demonstrating that compassion to the rest of the country and the rest of the world yesterday, Greg Abbott decided to give our state a giant black eye. And it's sad. It's extraordinarily sad. I agree with Julian Castro, who said during his presidential campaign that having secure borders and treating refugees with respect do not have to be mutually exclusive proposals. We can do both. We've done both for a long time. We need a pathway for citizenship here in the United States. We're not ever going to be able to deport 11 million individuals, and it's absurd to even talk about it. And it would also decimate our economy. And I also agree with him that Section 1325 needs to be repealed from the Immigration Act so that we stop criminalizing the immigration system here in the United States.
You know, so we see that Governor Abbott is choosing to play politics with the lives of refugees, people fleeing violence, war, real suffering. In this country, I know that no state probably has benefited more from the contributions and courage of immigrants than Texas. 1 in 3 Texans are like me. We are immigrants or children of immigrants. And I've seen up close the cost of an economic system in this state that has been willing to accept undocumented workers' labor, but not their full humanity. What we see happening with asylum seekers, whether it's at the border, the attacks that we see on immigrants and their children, whether the Trump administration is talking about rescinding the rights of dreamers so that they can never become US citizens, or whether they're talking about cutting legal migration in half or undercounting immigrants and their children in the US Census, what we need to understand is what they truly fear are not just people like my 62-year-old immigrant Mexican mother, but me, her US citizen daughter that can vote and has a dramatically different vision for my country than the one I see today.
Thank you.
Without having a place for refugees, I wouldn't be here. In 1876, 3 of my great-great-grandfathers were kicked out of Cuba because they were trying to create a democracy. It's amazing. Our Republican brothers and sisters on the far right, led by their person, the president. Yeah, that guy. They can continue to say they're Christians and have the morals that are Christianity. But when you read that #1 best-selling book that I love to read daily and sometimes nightly, you find out that it's actually law to set up a place in your place for refugees. So they're not reading the thing that they're saying that they are. So it's hypocrisy, and we need to vote hypocrisy out. So I need you to register people to vote. That's how we change laws, by changing Congress, changing the House, changing the Senate, changing local politicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are at a point now where this is the only guaranteed question. Every one of the candidates were given this one ahead of time. And that question is, imagine you're facing re-election 6 years from now. The year is 2026. At the press conference announcing your re-election campaign, that is, you explain what you accomplished in your first term of office. Question, 6 years from now, why should we re-elect you? Adrian, you first.
My hope would be that I was able to deliver some structural change at that point in time, in terms of the law or something. And my speech would probably go something like this: we've made a little bit of progress. There's a lot more to go. I also believe that I would only do 2 terms. My goal is to be there, if I had to round it, I would say 10 years. But because our terms are 6 years, I'd be there 12. And I'd say as promised, and I'd try to point to you who the next generation of leaders will be. Adopting a new system and thought process for how we tackle issues. One that is less on rhetoric, less on passion, and more just on tackling the issue we need to tackle. I know we are a very passionate crowd, and I get criticized a lot for not being passionate enough about a lot of issues. But I'm just tired. I want it fixed. And it doesn't do me anything. I met a gentleman yesterday. He's housing 2 unemployed people. Anger's not going to help him. He needs a job.
Thank you.
After serving 6 years as a United States Senator, we have accomplished overturning at least 10 years of policy violence. We were able to pass a living wage of $15, and now we're submitting into Congress a living wage of $27 an hour. We're able to overturn immigration policies that have incarcerated millions of children and families that have been seeking refuge at our borders because of the climate crisis that we are still trying to fix because of the failure of the leadership before us. We are proud to have overturned right-to-work laws in all 27 states, implement fair trade deals, and we look forward to implementing laws that will help better everyone in this country and ending the war economy and not waging unconstitutional wars with other foreign countries that are supposed to be our allies. And I look forward to serving 6 more years as your U.S. Senator.
Because we have finally figured it out. This economic model here, basically it's saying God blesses his people so that they may bless those who have yet to be blessed. Property owners and homeowners should be able to invest in people and get them some trade skills, and you get rewarded for it. Because we have understood that now we can invest in our communities and rebuild our communities. That everybody is making money, everybody has lower taxes. We for sure got the governor's mansion, and we got the lieutenant governor spot, because whoever wins, I'm talking about, you need to be able to campaign for whoever the challenger is for those 2 top spots in the state of Texas. And so we have proven ourselves that no federal legislation really is needed. It is all local.
My intent in going to the U.S. Senate is to pass and get some work done. One of those things is immigration and border security, a new process to engage asylum seekers and immigrants to the United States. The DACA has been solidified where people can stay, and there's a path to citizenship for each and every one of them. There's climate change. The economy of Texas has switched over to for service and industry with technology. 1/3 of it has been accomplished. In the next few years, we'll get to the second third and then follow on so we can be free of fossil fuels. Education. Every high school graduate in the state of Texas goes to college tuition free. Healthcare. We're going to expand Medicaid and Medicare. We're going to squeeze from the bottom and from the top. So far, we've only got 25% left, and we're going to get those. Those are the people that can afford private insurance, but we'll get there.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for being a part of our people-powered movement. As a result of you joining in and harnessing your power, we have managed to expand access to higher education so that students who want to access education now no longer face the high costs of tuition. We have been able also to expand access to health care so that now we have a public option that people can afford to access. We've closed the loopholes with regard to short-term insurance, and we've reduced the costs of prescription drugs. We have also had the opportunity to make sure that everyone, not just in Texas, but in this United States, has an opportunity to be a part of today and tomorrow's economy. We have now closed the gap with regard to broadband internet deserts, and we're providing incentives for jobs to be placed with sustainable wages and benefits. I encourage you to join with me for the next 6 years so that we can all live in the country we deserve.
Good afternoon. My voice is crazy right now. But let me say this to you. You elected me on a promise of bringing people together. You elected me because I have demonstrated experience in the areas of guns, in the areas of healthcare, because of the 26 years that I served in the state Senate before being elected by you as your U.S. Senator. I promised you when you elected me that I would do what we needed to do to make certain that healthcare is a fundamental right for all citizens. I promised you that if we elected a Democratic president, regained the Senate and the House, that we would do something about gun-related issues. I promised you also that we would restore the credibility of our public school system as opposed to trying to sell it off to private interests. I've done that. I've been a good steward in terms of what you've asked me to do, and I need 6 more years to get the rest done. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Over the course of the last 6 years, I have greatly enjoyed working with President Warren, Buttigieg, Sanders, Klobuchar, or Bloomberg. And because of my election 6 years ago, we were able to flip the United States Senate, and it was no longer the place where all bills went to die. I am so proud of the results that we have seen over the course of the last 6 years, especially in the area of gun control. Finally, we have red flag laws here in the United States. Finally, we have universal background checks. And finally, assault weapons are no longer in the hands of civilians on the streets of America. I love the gains we made in healthcare, that we do now have a public option, and that here in the state of Texas, we no longer have the highest number of uninsured. And I'm very glad that we've been able to turn back the war against Planned Parenthood, and that they are now in a position to continue to provide health care to thousands of women across the country. Thank you so much, and I ask for another 6 years.
So I'm so proud to have delivered change for you and with you over the last 6 years. And we proved something to the rest of the country, that in Texas we can dream big because we are big, and that we've been able to pass the components of the Green New Deal, and here in this state just over the last 6 years create 1 million good new green jobs in our state. We've been able to tackle the crisis of student debt that was hindering millions of people in this country. And we've now passed legislation so that our kids can know that they can be safe in their schools and concentrate on learning. And our communities are safe. We've raised wages for millions of workers in this country and helped rebuild the labor movement so that we can have a strong middle class in this country. But what I am most proud of is the fact that we are on the path to building an economy and country that will truly be for all of us, and that when we turned Texas blue 6 years ago, we together defeated the politics of hate from one of the reddest states in the country, because we knew that our strength was our diversity.
Thank you.
Give yourself a round of applause because you helped us, because we flipped the Senate and we finished the job of Congress and we impeached President Donald J. Trump. And after we did that, we expanded Medicaid and we made sure that everyone had accessible, affordable health care. We are almost completed with, there you go, we're almost completed with Medicare for all. Not some, but for all. Matter of fact, it looks so great that even millionaires want to give up their individual health care and jump on Medicare. Well, they're already socialists because most of them are now using Social Security as a retirement. Oh yeah, somebody say right. So these are the things that we've done, we're gonna accomplish. Also, we're gonna have criminal justice reform that we've already started working on. We now have legal marijuana in the state of Texas. How did that happen? There you go. And we're gonna use the money to profit to get better education.
Thank you.
Better classrooms and pay raise for teachers. Thank you.
6 years ago, we did something incredible and that everybody said was impossible. I was just a one fed up mama, and I paid my $5,000 and I filed my fee, and then I did something. I tried to build something that wasn't just about me, but it was about us. And you joined, you came with me, you walked with me, you walked 420 miles with me from Houston to El Paso, and we together protested and we showed the world what Texas is capable of. And because you joined me, this movement had success, and we have been able to achieve 75% voter turnout on off years. And we have been able to achieve a Congress that looks like America, that represents America. 29 black women in our Congress, 50% of our federal judges, people of color, 51% women in our Congress. And I thank you. I thank you for giving me the opportunity. I thank you for having joined me. But my kids, they're 7, 11, and 12 years old now, and I want to be a mom again. So I declined to run a second term.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now in overtime. We've been in overtime for a little while, but we want to listen to audience questions at this point. Both of our moderators have a few of the index cards in front of them. Candidates, we're going to reduce this down to 20 seconds answers, so that we can get several audience questions in, and that's where we're at. So we'll start with you, Kim.
From the Texas Democrats with Disabilities, if elected, how will you strengthen the ADA? Where do you want to start? Seaman? I don't remember where we stopped last. I think that's right.
I would have advocates for the ADA at the table with me to construct policy to better represent the needs that they need. I cannot speak for them. They have to be at the table and construct this policy along with me to implement it.
Thank you.
I would definitely, consult with DOJ, the Civil Rights Division, and disability laws activists to make sure that, they are getting treated fair all over the United States. Not just Texas, but, I'm not really familiar with it, so I definitely have to lean on other people. But I know we need full prosecution of who's not, following through with the law.
All right. Pre-existing conditions need to be covered. We're going to cover everybody. We got to cover pre-existing. Hey, we need to continue that. We need to make sure that any of the parts that have been trying to take it away, we need to include them to be strengthened, to include everyone who has disabilities to be able to access all buildings. I myself have a disability. I'm 100% disabled vet, but I'm still working. I worked through it, but I know that it won't be much longer. So I think that's a near and dear to myself as well.
I think one of the things that is strikingly important is that when there are violations with regard to the Americans with Disabilities Act, that there's somewhere where that can be, where people can go and where those issues can be modified and corrected. I was talking to someone very early on the campaign trail, and she shared with me when she has challenges getting a vehicle that is compliant with the ADA, where does she then go? And we need to be able to provide real answers so that compliance is then enforced.
When it comes to issues like the Americans with Disabilities Act, obviously the people who live in that community and live in that space are the ones who are most familiar with the needs and what needs to be addressed. And so I would take the same tack that I took as a member of the U.S. House. When you have those types of issues and you're going to have to rely on community members, you set up consulting groups that act as liaisons to your office so they can be filling you in on a regular basis.
The American with Disabilities Act was an important step, but it was simply a step. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. Elizabeth Warren just released the most comprehensive policies and plans to advance and move forward protecting the rights of disabled communities and make sure that they had full protections, whether it was expanding access in the workplace, disability benefits. And so I would support the proposals that she came up with the premier advocates in the disability rights community.
I have a good friend, 20 years ago, well, 30 years ago now, we're getting old, was at Lamar University in a wheelchair, and she converted the whole university, and she brought attention to it. And because of her, I now am more aware of it, and I thank her for that, and I love her for that. We need to set aside money and funds for that to redo our infrastructure, and also give grants for people in their homes that cannot afford to modify them with wheelchairs and other disabilities.
I'm going to go back to Senator West. Senator West, the question from the Texas Democrats with Disabilities. If elected, how will you strengthen the ADA?
The same way I've done in terms of state issues with your organization. I made certain I brought you into my office, making certain that I knew exactly what all of the issues are, and then establish what the priorities are. And then we'd work to make certain we pass those issues. I'm not going to sit up and say that I know all of the issues associated with the Act. You better than I do. And so bringing you in on a consistent basis, as I've done, I will continue to do that.
Back to Annie. How will you strengthen the ADA?
Right. So my daughter is actually disabled because she was born with a congenital heart defect, and that qualifies her as a disabled person. I've utilized that a lot in her education, and then even within our community to fight to get a fence in our front yard so that she wouldn't be in jeopardy with her life. There are holes in the ADA, and the solution is to talk to people that are affected by it and integrate them into our process.
Find the holes, identify what the funding sources are. I think this issue kind of gets pushed down on in terms of the priority list. Funding is not going to be the constraint, and that's another part of what I talk about in terms of monetary policy. Funding is not the constraint. The constraint is usually resources, human capital to enforce the laws that we have on the books.
Can we start with you, Sue? Okay. Gabrielle, it's to you.
Okay, we have, Jaime, I need you to come up for a second here because we have some people who really are under time constraints and other kinds of things. I need to ask one more question here of the candidates. And Lauren with Indivisible Houston asked, if elected, which two Senate committees would you want to serve on? Just go straight down here. If elected, which two Senate committees would you want to serve on?
Education and also appropriation.
Judiciary and International Affairs.
Judiciary and education.
Education and judiciary.
Appropriation, international affairs.
There you go. Judiciary, finance.
Finance and military.
Labor and Human Resources and pension board.
Appropriations and armed services.
Judiciary and in particularly the subcommittee on Homeland Security.
Okay, a final round of applause for all your candidates. Some of these, you may not know, but some of these candidates have traveled across the state this morning to be here, and several of them are leaving to go back to other parts of the state tonight. So they've really done a good job. This has been the one forum with the most candidates in attendance. So give it up for all of y'all.